let's have a look at this. What is exchange rate? We did talk about this. Exchange rate is the value of one currency in terms of another, right? Okay, so just like any other product where there's demand for the good, and just like any other product where there's supply for the good, right? Commodity exchange rate currency is also a commodity. It's also a product which has some demand, which has some supply. Okay, now if you're looking at the exchange rate between dollars and rupees, so you will have dollars slash rupee on the y-axis, and we know that whichever of the two is the second currency, that will be on the x-axis. So you will have quantity of rupees on the x-axis. Now what you need to add to the graph is downward sloping demand curve for rupees, and upward sloping will be the supply curve for rupees, right? So upward sloping is the supply curve, downward sloping was the demand curve, right? Is it simple? Students, any confusion about this? Okay. Now, this being said, wherever the demand and supply of the demand and supply curves intersect, that will be your exchange rate, right? So let's say each rupee is buying you, let's say $0.50 or whatever, right? $0.50 per rupee. Okay. Now think about this. Abdul, pay close attention, right? So who demands your currency? Now think about this. In our country, we are using our own currency, and in other countries of the world, they are using their own currencies. Now, the first thing that you need to ask yourself, that why would you ever need any other country's currency, right? So why I'm sitting in Pakistan, or I would need to hold dollars, or why would I need to hold pounds or euros and so on and so forth? So the obvious answer to that is exactly, right? So that is when you are going to another country for tourism, or you're importing something from another country or something on the sort. Now, looking at it from Pakistan's point of view, who will demand rupees? You, me, and all the other people who are living in Pakistan will not demand rupees, because that is the currency that they already hold. In your wallet, your parents earn in rupees, they pay you in rupees, their bank accounts are in rupees, so we already have rupees, right? But who demands rupees? Who doesn't have it? Who doesn't have it? And who are those people? They are the foreigners. So if anyone is coming to Pakistan, as I just told you, right, they would need rupees to make transactions in Pakistan. Okay, if they go to a restaurant in Pakistan, right, they would need to have rupees rather than dollars or pounds or whatever currency their own country has, right? So that is what foreigners demand. So foreigners will demand your currency. And who will supply rupees? Think about this. In this entire world, Pakistani rupee is only printed by one institution in the world, and that is Central Bank of Pakistan. Similarly, the American dollars in the entire world is supplied by one institution, that is the Central Bank, Federal Reserve Bank of America, right? Or the Americans, because they already hold it. So in case of supply of rupees, it is the Pakistanis who already have this currency, and they are the ones who will be supplying it. Now, when do we supply our currency? Now listen to this very carefully. When we spend it, when we spend our currency to exchange it for another currency. So when we spend our currency to exchange it with another currency, that is when we are supplying it. We are supplying it, right? And yes, that happens when we import. That happens when we import. Students, are you getting me? Okay, now the idea is fairly simple and easy. I'll ask you a few examples and you have to tell me what is happening in each case. So let's assume Pakistan, right? So most students are going from Pakistan to foreign countries for study. Which of the two will be affected, and in which direction will it shift? If more Pakistanis are going to foreign countries for study, how would we show this on the graph? Who will tell me? Right? So it will be a rightward shift in the supply. Did everyone answer the same? Right, exactly. It will be a rightward shift in the supply. Excellent, right? Why? Because we already know the entire mechanism behind it, right? So when you're going from Pakistan to study in another country, let's say, USA. So what you will do, you'll go to your bank, you'll say that here are rupees, right? And I want it to be converted to dollars. So the currency that you're providing to the bank, right? That is the currencies which supply will increase. So that is the currency whose supply will increase. So in this case, It is the rupees. So rupees supply will increase, and the currency that you buy from the bank, which is the currency that you're buying from the bank. Because think about this. When you go to bank to convert rupees into dollars, so rupee supply is increasing. That is becoming available on international markets or currency markets. Rupees is becoming available on international markets, and the dollars that was available on the currency markets, those were being taken away by people, right? Now they're not anymore available because someone has bought it. So the demand is going up, as simple as that. But since we're making the exchange rate from Pakistan's point of view, right? So we have to show only what is happening to rupees. Students, listen to this carefully. Since this previous exchange rate graph that I was making over here, we have, that's why I specified, right? So you have quantity of rupees on the x-axis, and therefore the demand curve is of rupees and the supply curve is also for rupees. Now, since we are looking at the exchange rate from rupees point of view, what is happening to rupees, that is the only thing that will show on the graph, right? So in this case, you will show a rightward shift in rupees curve, a rightward increase in supply, right? A rightward shift in supply of rupees, increase in the supply of rupees, right? When that happens, your exchange rate will depreciate. Now each rupee would buy you less dollars. Each rupee would buy you less dollars. Am I right with this or not? Right? Depreciate. Easy. Okay. Another example. If more foreigners are coming to Pakistan, what would that do? More foreigners are coming to Pakistan. What would that do? Right? For tourism. For tourism, more students are coming. Not students, sorry, more people are coming to Pakistan, right? So simply think about this. Now, in this case, the demand for rupees would increase. Why? Because just imagine what would happen. They'll go to the bank, right? And they will say that we are traveling to Pakistan, so we want our currency to be converted from our currency, which might be, let's say, dollars or pounds or whatever, and in exchange we want rupees, right? So as I said, the currency that you provide to a bank, the currency that you provide to the bank, that is the currencies whose supply will increase, and the currency that you buy from the bank, that is the currency whose demand will increase, right? So supply of dollars going up in this case, and the demand for rupees is going up in this case. Demand for rupees will be going up in this case. Easy, is this simple, right? But we are making it from rupees point of view, so we will show an upward shift in the demand for rupees, an upward shift in the demand for rupees. So demand curve for rupees will shift rightwards from this to this one. Easy, any confusion? Currency appreciate, absolutely, right? So this is the entire thing that you have to understand. Then let me ask you a difficult one. What happens if Pakistan starts importing less? All of a sudden, let's say a new trade policy is devised by Pakistan, and according to that trade policy, Pakistan imposes some restrictions, right? Like trade barriers and so on and so forth, right? Now, how would we show that on the graph? So if Pakistan is importing less, think about this. Everyone, please take a minute. How will this be shown on our exchange rate? Right. Just a second, I'll come to that, Aslam. Right, supply shifts leftward. Supply shifts leftward, students. So when you're importing less, just imagine, exactly, very good, excellent. So when you are importing less, your supply curve would shift to the left. Why? Because now less of rupees are being exchanged. Less of rupees are being exchanged against other currencies, so your supply curve will shift to the left, like this. And your, obviously, exchange rate will appreciate when supply is shifting to the left. Okay, now means appreciation, yes. Okay, now students, have a look at this. Now, what is trade weighted exchange rate and what is real exchange rate, right? Now, trade weighted, let's first talk about the trade weighted exchange rate. Now, students, think about this. Have a look at this. Please pay attention. If you look at exchange rate of rupees, then you have to choose one other currency against which you are looking at the exchange rate, right? So exchange rate is the value of one currency in terms of another. How many currencies there are in the world, right? So there are 170 countries, approximately, I don't know, right? But approximately 170 countries in the world, right? Asia, Africa, Australia, North America, South America, Europe, blah, blah, blah. But few countries use the same currency, and that is only European Union, right? So let's say you will have one, I don't know, 150 currencies at least. Students, are you getting what I'm trying to say here? So you have 150 currencies in the world, 170 countries, but some countries use the same currency. So that leaves you with approximately 150 or something slightly less than 150 currencies in the world. Okay. Now, Pakistan's exchange rate would be a different value against dollars. Pakistan's exchange rate with pounds would be a different, a unique value, and similarly with all the other currencies. So right now, if I have to give you an example, $1 American dollar buys how much Pakistani rupees? 172 rupees. In terms of pounds, 1 pound of UK buys 229 rupees for Pakistan or something of the sort, right? And in some other cases, I was looking at Pakistan's exchange rate with Zimbabwe, right? I think this is Uganda. I was just, we had a student from Uganda and we were just trying to see how much is their exchange rate. And that was 1 rupee of R is buying, somewhat, just a second, I would need to do some maths. It's quite weak. Ugandan currency is quite weak. Right, we're coming to that, right? So let me just quickly show you over here. Can you see my screen, students? PKR into right. So yeah, have a look at this. So you need to have right. So 1 Ugandan is, so if we have 2, right, 2.1 5 and 20, right, 21, right, exactly. So 1 rupee is equals to, you can see 1 Pakistani rupee is equals to 21 Ugandan shilling, right? So coming back to the point, so with every other currency, you have a different exchange rate, right? Ugandan shilling, right? Whatever the symbol for that is. Okay, now coming back to the point, when you talk about the trade weighted exchange rate, now listen to this very carefully. Out of all the countries in the world, how many countries would Pakistan trades with, right? That is what you have to look at. So let's say there are a total of 25 countries in the world that Pakistan trades with, right? And you can just make a list. Obviously, you would know, economists would know USA, UK, Canada, Australia, whatever, blah, 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 right? You make this complete list. Okay. Now moving on, so your trade weighted exchange rate shows that how many units of your currency would buy 1 unit of a foreign currency. Now think about this. In this case, in trade weighted exchange rate, we are not specifying which currency we are making the exchange rate against. No. Think about this. So if, let's say, USA, we trade 20% of Pakistan's trade is with USA and 30% trade is with UK, and the remaining 50% is with other countries. So we take a cumulative exchange rate value to aggregate exchange rate value. So we make aggregate exchange rate value with all these other currencies. So that will show you, let's say, that would show you, let me write that down for you, 1 unit of foreign currency, right, which is not any specific currency, right? That is basically aggregate of all the countries' currency with which we trade, is equals to, let's say, 50 rupees of Pakistani currency, right? Now, instead of here specifying that whether it's dollars or whether it's pounds or whether it's, shillings or whatever, right? All the countries that Pakistan trades with, you aggregate their value together, right? On the basis of how much is the value of trade with each of these countries. And then that will tell you that 1 unit of foreign currency is equivalent to, let's say, 50 of Pakistani rupees. And similarly, if in future that goes like this, 1 unit of foreign currency is equals to 30 units of Pakistani rupees. So then what does this tell? Did our currency appreciated or did our currency depreciated? Did our currency appreciated or did our currency depreciated? If this is from where we move to here, right? If we move from here to here. So what does this tell you? Right? So this shows that our currency, think again, Pakistani rupees. Did Pakistani rupees appreciated or depreciated? Students, how can you make such a basic mistake? Previously, 1 unit of foreign currency was buying 50 rupees of Pakistani currency, 50 units of Pakistani currency. Now that same 1 unit of foreign currency is only buying 30 rupees of Pakistani currency. Right? So this is constant. This left-hand side is the same, but this is decreasing. So foreign currency is now buying less. This means that Pakistan's exchange rate appreciated. Right? Students, you can't make this very basic mistake. You can't make this very basic mistake, right? So the long story short is trade weighted exchange rate is trade weighted exchange rate. You don't need to know anything more than this according to your syllabus. Shows your currency's exchange rate against the basket of other currencies against the basket other currencies with which your country trade. With which, students, are you following me? Your country's trades, and the weights are based on so do you understand the concept of weights? Just like we did in inflation, right? So we assign weights. Products that take a bigger proportion of your income will be assigned more weights, and the products that take a smaller proportion of your income are assigned, lower weights, right? The weights are based on the proportion of international trade that your country makes with each of those foreign countries. Is based on proportion of trade our country undertakes with foreign country, with any foreign country, right? Is it making sense? Any foreign country. Is everyone clear on this? Right? So think about this. What is trade weighted exchange rate? So trade weighted exchange rate is not telling your exchange rate with any specific currency. Trade weighted exchange rate, unlike normal exchange rate, let me answer that again. So unlike normal exchange rate, where one currency is valued in terms of another currency, one other currency, that could be dollars, that could be rupees, that could be Bangladeshi taka, that could be anything, right? But in trade weighted, you make your currency compared to a basket of other currencies. And what are those basket of other currencies? These are all the countries with which you trade. And the weights in this calculation is based on the proportion of trade our country undertakes with any foreign country. So if Pakistan undertakes 50% of it, if it's trade with USA, then 50% of the trade weight exchange rate would have, we will weight dollars 50%, and the remaining currencies will be 50%. Okay, now what is the importance? Now think about this. Now what it tells you, now think about it, that's a very good question. If your trade weighted exchange rate is appreciating, what would it show? It would show that your currency's demand during that time period was more compared to other currencies, which basically means that your trade performance improved. You exported more compared to you imported. Are you guys getting me or not? Because think about this. How a country's exchange rate appreciates? A country's exchange rate appreciates only when the demand for its currency is more, or when the supply is less. So when you are exporting more, the demand would go up. Yes or no? So when would your currency's demand go up? Because we are only looking at the trade weighted, right? So that is when you are exporting more. And when would the supply be less? When you are importing less, right? So higher demand means stronger exchange rate, lower supply means stronger exchange rate. When would the demand for your currency be higher? When you're exporting more. And when would the supply of your currency be less? When you're importing less. So this is basically what it shows, right? So appreciation of trade weighted exchange rate would show that a country had a positive position on its trade in goods and trade in services, because it shows it exported more and imported less, and vice versa. If our trade weighted exchange rate is depreciating, this means that we performed poorly in relation to our trading partners, and we had a deficit on the trade in goods and trade in services. Is making sense, students? So that just shows only from the point of view of how good or how bad a country performed in terms of its trade with all the other countries that it trades with, right? Is everyone clear? Students, are we good on this? Right? Okay, what are the questions? What are the questions you have? Affect the demand and supply of exchange rate. Okay, Abdul, let's answer that. Okay, students, how inflation affects the demand and supply of exchange rate. Have a look at this now. Now, just try to understand this intuitively. Just try to understand this. Right, I will after this, Alba. So just try to understand this intuitively, students. Now, think about this. You have inflation, right? Every country in the world is facing inflation. The main thing that you have to compare is that how much is inflation rate in Pakistan compared to its competitors, right? Now, this is something that you need to understand. So let's say if India, China, and Pakistan are exporting similar products, let's also include Bangladesh. So if Pakistan, India, China, and Bangladesh are exporting similar goods, right, then you have to compare the rate of inflation between these countries. Why so? I'll tell you, right? Now think about this. Think of another country that wants to import. So let's say Pakistan, India, and China, and Bangladesh all export cotton, right? Or textiles or whatever, right? Now, the importing country, on the other hand, let's say UK or USA, they have to compare the prices between these four countries. They have to compare the prices between these four countries. So if your country's inflation rate, think about it, if Pakistan's inflation rate is relatively higher than all the other countries, right? So if Pakistan's inflation rate is higher compared to all the other countries, then this means our products are less competitive in relation to our competitors. So USA and UK would want to import from either, let's say, China or Bangladesh or India or whatever, right? Now, yes, right? So your absolute advantage will be converted into a disadvantage, right? So you will lose your absolute advantage if your rate of inflation in the country is higher than your competitors. If inflation is high, exports expensive, so demand reduced and lower exchange rate. Exactly. So as Preet said, think about this. Now, Abdul, did you get this example that I told you? So if assuming Pakistan exchange rate is relatively higher than the other countries that export the same products, so demand for our exports will decrease. And this is exactly what happened. This is exactly what happens to Pakistan textile industry, right? So a lot of Pakistan, since cost of production was getting higher and higher in Pakistan, right? Due to different reasons. So the demand of textiles that our industries used to satisfy previously, so the orders that Pakistani textile firms used to get previously, a lot of those got shifted to Bangladesh, right? Because our products were not very competitive now in terms of prices, right? Now, what does that mean? That when we will be exporting less textiles, our demand curve will shift to the left. When it shifts to the left, you can see for yourself. Previously, where was your exchange rate? Here was your exchange rate, right? And you can see for yourself, let's say each rupee was buying, let's say, $0.50. And now each rupee is buying you less than $0.50, right? Because the demand for your currency is less. And another thing, it will also have another thing. Think about from the point of view of imports. Now for Pakistanis, if local inflation rate is higher, so I will see that the prices in Pakistan are more compared to the imports. So I would want to import more. I would want to import more, given that there are no trade barriers, obviously, right? Because if there are trade barriers, then it becomes more difficult, right? So if there are no trade barriers, I, being a Pakistani, would find local goods getting more expensive, right? And I will find imported goods cheaper. So when I will import more, the supply will also increase, which means that our exchange rate will depreciate even further. That is the entire relationship, and vice versa, right? Easy, Abdul, does it make sense? Anyone who's not clear, anything that you want to ask me about this? Does it make sense, right? So just keep it intuitive. Higher inflation, your products are becoming less attractive for foreigners. They will find your products more expensive, so they'll not import from you. When they will not import from you, the demand for your goods will decrease. When the demand for your goods will decrease, the demand for your currency will decrease, right? And it will depreciate. On the other hand, imports will be cheaper for you, so you'll want to import more, and supply also increases. As simple as that. Okay. Right. Yes, because supply increases, above. Yes, that's correct. So when you start to import, so think about this. In case you are exporting less, first thing, or you are importing more, exchange rate will be depreciated. In case of more imports, your supply of the currency will increase. And in case of less exports, the demand for your currency will decrease. So that is the entire idea here. So the depreciation means an exchange when expensive prices decreases, when export prices decreases and import price rise. But that will happen after this has happened. Abdurrahim, I totally get your point. But what you're doing now, right now, is that you are trying to take it a step forward. Yes, when our exchange rate will depreciate initially due to less competitive prices, then in the longer run, yes, our currency has become weaker. Our currency has become weaker. This means our export prices will decrease and import prices will increase. Then perhaps you might be able to stabilize your trade position in the long run. Yeah, I totally got it. So, did you get what Abdul Rahim said? So after, have a look at this. So initially, this was the situation. Pakistan's products were least competitive compared to its competitors. Yes or no? Right? Because all the other three countries have lower exchange rate compared to Pakistan. What it did to our exchange rate? What it did to our exchange rate? It decreased the demand for our currency, right? Because our exports were less, and it also increased the supply of our currency because our imports increased. With that happening, now our exchange rate has become weaker. Now our exchange rate, students, have a look at this. Against dollars, our exchange rate has decreased from previously a rupee buying half a dollar to now each rupee buying just 20 cents, right? Now, for Americans, our products will become more competitive compared to India, China, and Bangladesh. Yes or no? So, in the longer run, yes, in the longer run, after exchange rate getting depreciated, we might be able to export more. Right? Are you getting me? So, it's a circle, it goes in circle. No, 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 no. Think about this, think about this, think about this. Abdurrahim, have a look at this. Okay, think about this. So let me give you an example. If now you are confusing things out, right? Now just stay at the first stage. In the first stage, this was happening. Is this clear so far? In the first stage, what we saw was that Pakistan's prices were increasing at a faster rate compared to India, China, and Bangladesh, right? Okay, now I'm sitting in Pakistan and I want to buy something. I want to buy new shoes, I want to buy some clothes, I want to buy some things and so on, right? Now I open some local brands and I find those local brands more expensive compared to the brands that I find on Amazon, right? Now, what will I do? Since Pakistan's exchange rate is higher compared to other countries, so I might find foreign goods cheaper. I might find foreign goods cheaper, right? So I'll go to Amazon and I saw, let's say, some shirts, I saw some clothes or something that I'm interested in buying, and I found that to be relatively cheaper compared to the things that compared to the local products here in Pakistan. I would do what? Let's assume that there are no trade barriers, there will be no customs, there will be no tariffs, and there will be free trade. I would want to import because local goods are getting more expensive. Yes or no? Right? So I would want to import that good. Right? Are you getting me? So just like saying if Pakistan's inflation is higher, so the cars that are produced in Pakistan every year will be getting more expensive compared to the cars that we import. So local consumers might find imported cars cheaper, and that's why they might want to import rather than buy locally. Now, is this making sense? Now, is this making sense? But yes, after that, in the longer run, our demand might increase because our exchange rate would have gotten weaker. Easy. Any confusion so far, students? Anything that's not clear? Anything else you want to ask? We good? Everyone's clear? Very good. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So what is Marshall-Lerner condition? Let's talk about that, students. Now pay attention. What is Marshall-Lerner condition? Right? So Marshall-Lerner condition tells you the relationship between exchange rate and balance of payments. I repeat myself. Marshall-Lerner condition tells you the relationship between countries' exchange rate and its balance of payments. Explains between countries' exchange rate and its balance of payments. Any confusion so far? Okay, now think about this. Now, students, we know that balance of payment for most countries, the balance of within balance of payments, the two accounts that have biggest values, two sections that have biggest values in balance of payments. Obviously, balance of payments include all international transactions of a country, but trade in goods and trade in services of current account are two subsections that have biggest amounts in balance of payments. Is this making sense? So if there is any change, right. So if there is any change in the exchange rate of a country, that will have an effect on our trade performance that we were just talking about, right? So if there is any change in our exchange rate, if there's any change in our exchange rate, right, that will have an effect on our trade performance. Does it make sense? Okay, now have a look at this. What Marshall Learning Condition says that if a country's exchange rate is becoming weaker, what would that do? That would improve your country's balance of payment. So if a country's exchange rate is becoming weaker, right, it will convert the country's deficit on the balance of payment to a surplus. Now, what does that mean? Now, listen to me very carefully, right? Pakistan's exchange rate against dollars and pounds is one of the weakest in the recent history. Pakistan's exchange rate, now listen to this very carefully. It'll get worse in the short run. Yeah, that's correct. Absolutely. Arbab, listen to this. So ask your parents, or I can tell you from my own experience, right? Pakistan's exchange rate has never been this weak against dollars, right? In the recent history, at least in the last 10 or 15 years, this is the weakest level of our exchange rate with dollars. This is making sense, right? And all the other currencies are competitors, like with Indian rupee, I think it's kind of stable. With Chinese yuan, it's also dollars exchange rate with yuan is also kind of stable in Bangladesh and so on, right? Now, for Americans, our products will be relatively much cheaper compared to other countries. Is it making sense? So for USA, Pakistani products have become more attractive. Do you guys agree with me or not? Are you guys agreeing with me? On the other hand, since our exchange rate is so weak, what would you do? If right now a Pakistani student is thinking about going to USA for studies, I mean, just imagine, right? This is insane. So we started a few years back where $1 used to buy approximately 100 rupees. So I used to give just 100 rupees to buy $1. Now I have to give 172 rupees to buy $1. So for us, American products and imports and all those things are more expensive. And now this is not only Pakistan's exchange rate with dollars, it's also Pakistan's exchange rate with pounds that is weak. It's also Pakistan's exchange rate with euros, most probably that would be weak and so on. Now what happens when a currency starts getting weaker, our products become cheaper in relation to other countries. Are you guys following me? So let's say this was the original position where $1 of America was equals to 100 rupees of Pakistani rupee, 100 Pakistani rupees. Now, when that kept depreciating, and that reached to this level, for Americans, our products are cheaper, and for us, their products is more expensive. Now, again, as I said, this is not only happening against dollars, this is also happening against pounds. Our currency is becoming weaker against pounds, against euros, against all the other currencies in the world, majority of the other currencies in the world. So our exports will increase because our products are cheaper for foreign countries, but our imports will decrease because for us, imported goods are much more expensive. So eventually, what would that do? Exports start to increase and imports starts to decrease. So initially, for some time period, our deficit worsens a little bit, right? It reaches the lowest point over here, and then slowly and gradually, it starts to improve. So our deficit is, converted after this point from deficit into surplus. So it's a J curve, right? It's also known as J curve, which shows you what happens in Marshall-Lerner condition. Anything that anyone did not understand over here, right? I can also write down the definition for you if that is what makes you understand this, right? But there's a condition for Marshall-Lerner condition. There's a condition that needs to be met. Let me write this down. Marshall-Lerner condition says that states that depreciation of a country's currency will convert its balance of payments from deficit to a surplus if will convert its balance of payments from deficit to a surplus from deficit to surplus if the price elasticity of demand for its exports and imports is more elastic. If the price elasticity of demand, now this is the requirement, this is the condition, right? So price elasticity should be more elastic. Elasticity of exports and imports combined right? So if the price elasticity of demand of countries' exports and imports combined is more elastic, only then Marshall-Lerner condition would hold true. Is more elastic, which means greater than 1, right? So this is what the definition of Marshall-Lerner condition is, greater than 1, right? Is this simple? Any confusion so far? Anything that's not clear? Right? PED greater than 1 for exports and imports together. Exactly, right? Arbab, does it make sense? So let's read this definition one more time. So students, Marshall-Lerner condition, I was telling you that it explains the relationship between countries' exchange rate and its balance of payments, right? Okay, now what Marshall-Lerner condition says that if a country's exchange rate becomes weaker, and this is what I've always told you, that this is what China, USA accuses China of doing. USA accuses China that they artificially keep their exchange rate weak so that they are able to export more, right? So you can understand that they are talking about Marshall-Lerner condition and J-curve. So what happens, you move from deficit and then you slowly and gradually moves out of deficit and go into a surplus, right? J-shaped graph. Now, what is the reason behind this? Marshall-Lerner condition states that depreciation of a country's currency will convert its balance of payment from deficit to surplus if the price elasticity of demand for exports and imports combined is greater than 1. In the short run, as demand is price inelastic for both exports and imports, that's why it will get worse, but in the long run, we'll find cheaper substitutes for imports there. Exactly, that's absolutely correct. So in the short run, if you're thinking that why is that not going straight upward like this, right? So when your exchange rate has already depreciated, why doesn't it quickly go as a straight line upwards? So it will depreciate for some time. Why so? As Abdul Rahim rightly said, that in the short run, your demand is inelastic. Why is your demand inelastic? Because think about this. If Pakistan has already made some contracts of importing oil from USA or any other country, so those would be fixed for some time, right? And this is what always happens, that countries have already made some trade, contracts and all that stuff.